Hello, my name is Matthew Parkinson Bennett. I'm here at the Instituto Cervantes with Lia Mills, who is one of the guests of the ISLA Literary Festival. Hello, Lia.
Hi, Matthew.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. The theme of this festival is memory. And you've recently written your novel Fallen, which is set during the period in Ireland around the First World War and then the 1916 Rising, which intrudes in on that. And I wonder what you think is the role of literature, or the role literature can play in our national remembering of these historical events.
I think the role of literature is to ask awkward questions, really. And the job of a writer, I think, is to be really an irritant almost to society and to be poking our noses into places that they maybe have no business being, and to be, asking awkward questions.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are making sweeping statements, say, yeah, but look over here, have you thought about this?
Sure. And so, when it comes to World War I in this country, there's been a lot of feeling in recent years that because of what happened with 1916 and the events that followed, that we hadn't done a very good job of adequately remembering World War I and the role of Irish soldiers in World War I. Do you think that's something that's being corrected, or is that still a process that needs to continue?
I think it's in the process of being corrected. And I think not doing a very good job is understating it. In fact, a huge influence on how this novel ended up being written, I really hadn't considered World War I at all, because in my generation, when we were studying history, we kind of came to 1914 and then it stopped.
Right.
And then there was a kind of summary of what happened after the Civil War. Really, there was nothing in between. So I really had never thought about the First World War at all. But what happened was, I had a residency in the Centre Culturel Irlandais in Paris, and the day that I arrived, it was just after the anniversary of the liberation of Paris in 1945. So the first couple of days I was walking around Paris getting my bearings, and literally every street you would come upon a plaque or a memorial. There were fresh flowers left on the walls and at the monuments, and I was just really struck by the traces of the war that are still there in European cities. And I realised we have none of that. We have none of that. And so I began to think about that huge big void that was there, the big silence. And I began to read about Irish soldiers in the First World War, and I just began to get really angry on their behalf. And that was, the novel just turned itself inside out then, became completely different than it had been.
It had previously been just about 1916?
Yeah. It even, all the action happened between Easter Sunday and the following Sunday, and I thought, that's a perfect structure for a novel.
Okay.
You have the normal world, and then you have everything going crazy, and then your progression through the events, and then looking back afterwards. But I just had to write a bit of background then, a lot of background. I kept writing backwards, filling it in.
Okay. Yeah. Digging back into World War I, or the outbreak of World War I.
It was more, I began to write a series of letters between all the characters, and I spent about a year doing that, and in the end only fragments of maybe 5 of those letters make it into the novel.
Okay.
But it was a process of me making myself familiar with how people might have felt, what they might have said to each other, what might have happened, what they might have done, what they might have been afraid of. So, Hemingway has this thing about in a story that you read, it's like an iceberg. The visible part is only the top 1/6, but you have all of that underneath. Yeah. So that's, the war is what's underneath this.
Okay. And so when you were writing or planning to write, did you do a lot of research with primary materials, or was it more important to you to imagine yourself into the experience these people had?
I did a lot of research, and I think I probably did too much research.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily advise it, because in the end I had to clear it out. It was like dead wood in the novel. If you put too much information in there, it just slows everything down. It'll choke a novel to death. But I really love doing research. It's my guilty secret, I think. I would do it forever.
Yeah.
At some point you have to take yourself by the scruff of the neck and say, no, you have to stop now. It was a mix of reading historical accounts and then going back and reading contemporaneous accounts, people's diaries, James Stephen's The Insurrection in Dublin, and I love James Stevens anyway, so that was probably the first thing that I read that really got me fired up about it. Then I began, field trips. I went to museums, felt the uniforms, lifted the gun in Collins Barracks, all of that. But letters, that was a big thing. I went to the Imperial War Museum in London and I read some of the actual letters that have been written by soldiers. And to touch a letter, that's a real letter that has been written by hand by somebody and entrusted to the Postal Service and delivered into the hands of somebody else who is desperate to know news of this person.
Yeah.
It's just extraordinary. It's like touching the sleeve of history. It's an amazing privilege, I think, to be able to do that. Now, in the UK, the National Archive have made a whole trove of letters from the front available online, and I'm really glad actually I didn't have access to that when I was writing the novel, because if I had I might never have finished it.
Yeah.
Then another big influence for me was Vera Britton's book Letters from a Lost Generation, which is the letters exchanged between her brother, her fiancé and 2 or 3 of their friends. And it's a really powerful account of war and the impact it had. None of those men survived, none of them. She is the only one who was alive when the war was over.
Okay.
And they were young men. They were barely out of school. They were babies.
You say you almost did too much research. Was there a point where the research could kind of block your ability to you block your imaginative ability? Would you have too much information, or was it just a case of at a certain point you spent too much time on the research?
Partly it was spending too much time, but then also when you have all that information, you really kind of want to show it off.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But you have to hide it because readers don't want to be dragged out of the story and told, look over here because this is what this means, or this is what was going on behind the scenes. So I just had to cut an awful lot of it out.
You've also written a book called In Your Face about your personal experience of illness. Can you say something about the experience of drawing on your personal memory to write something that will be meaningful for other people?
Thinking about this conference, actually, I was thinking about exactly that question because the strange thing about writing that memoir is that I didn't have to rely on memory. I had a series of notebooks. When I was admitted to hospital, I had a notebook with me. I'm an obsessive note taker anyway. But I was working on a novel at the time and I thought, well, I'm not going to let the diagnosis of cancer stop me. I'll bring my notebook in and I'll keep working. But what happened was that I just became really fascinated by everything that was going on around me. And I wrote everything down, and the notebooks, it was as if they bred independently, in the locker beside my bed. Everybody brought me in notebooks, and I just kept writing and writing things people said to me, the things that were done. I was trying to understand, the whole new vocabulary of illness and treatment, trying to keep track of all the different people who came past the bed. But at the same time, I was noticing what was going on around me in the wards, and at the time, that was 2006. It really was the untold Irish story. We were hearing on the radio all the time about the crisis in the health service and people left on trolleys for days at a time. It's still happening. But I suddenly found myself in that world, and it's like being in a parallel universe. And the main world is going on outside, oblivious. And you're trapped, and you can't escape. It's like being down the rabbit hole. So at the time, I was holding on to myself really very, very hard through writing those notebooks. But I texted my editor, who's Brendan Barrington in Penguin Ireland, and I asked him if he thought people would be interested in a piece about just diagnosis and being in the hospital and waiting for surgery, and he said yes. But by the time that article was published, so many things had gone wrong that we were joking about part 2 and part 3 and part 4. So I said, do you think there's a novel? Do you think there's a book in it? And he said yes. So that's how the book came about. It was already written. All the raw material was there. I just had to go back and shape it. so it was very instructive to me, actually, from a craft point of view, to think about where to start, where to end, and where to put the high points, and how to make it interesting, because it wasn't just about me, it was about what it is to be ill in a health servicing crisis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This ISLA is a cross-cultural event, you might say. Are we good as Irish readers at engaging with literature from other cultures, other parts of the world?
Oh, I don't know. That's a really good question. I think some people are. I think maybe the poets do it best.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really difficult question. I think we're very Anglophone.
Yeah.
We barely even engage with literature in the Irish language, except for a very small minority of people. So with Britain and America, yes, but outside of that, unless work is in translation, we're very bad at languages.
True. Yeah.
In this country, really bad. It's a cause of shame.
What's next? Have you got another novel in the pipeline, or is that something that's beyond the horizon?
No, I am about to start into another novel, and it's a bit like saying I'm going to go away for a very long time now. You won't be seeing me again for a while. So I'm just starting, so I'm kind of wool gathering and thinking around it and making the odd note and getting ready to start next week, actually.
Okay.
After this is over.
Right, very good. Okay, thank you, Lia.
Thank you, Matthew.